The Champions League is back, and thankfully for Liverpool, they've almost already got the job done. They only need one more point for the remaining 2 games, and that starts tomorrow night against Lille. We are here at the AXA to watch them get put through their paces in their little open training session. I'm sure most eyes will be trained on whether or not we see Diogo Jota, whether or not his little niggle is something more serious, or whether he can return to training this week. We'll also be going up to Anfield later to listen to Arne in his press conference. We'll also be hearing from one of the players. I haven't heard which player it is yet, but I have my suspicions. I think sometimes with these things you can kind of do a bit of deducing to work out who's already spoken, who's unlikely to speak, who doesn't speak very much English. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw maybe Ibrahima Konate, maybe Costa Simicas, maybe even Curtis Jones coming up later on this afternoon. But we'll have to wait and see before all that comes. Roll call.
Game at Anfield, and I think you can probably tell from the pictures we're showing you. I find a noise coming from the lads at the moment. Liverpool.
So, turns out I do know a thing or two about a thing or two. I said to you before, it may well be Ibrahima Konate, who we get to hear from later. And guess what? That's exactly who we're going to hear from later. Now, you can just about see the boys training away behind me. Nearly everybody is there, but as expected, Diogo Jota not quite ready to join the rest of the team training. Joe Gomez obviously still out, but everyone else is still there. Now, you don't need to see necessarily exactly what they're getting up to. It's none of the tactical stuff. It's just a bit of running around. And to be honest, I'm getting pissed on here. It's raining, so we're going to cut this short. We're going to go back to Anfield, where all the real action is going to happen. We've made it to Anfield. I'm here by the Champions Wall because it's still raining outside. So I have just spoken to Arne and to Ibou Konate ahead of this big Champions League game against Lille. And Arne was on good form. He came out defending Darwin Núñez, as was expected. He also had some bad news about Diogo Jota. Turns out that he's going to be weeks rather than days, and to be honest, it sounds like he's not going to be back much earlier than Joe Gomez, which is obviously a big blow. I spoke to him about that. I spoke to him about whether or not this means that Liverpool are going to be dealing with Federico Chiesa a little bit differently, because frankly Liverpool did everything they could to keep Jota fit and it still wasn't enough. But we will discuss more about that. Frankly, I want to hear from Ibrahima Konate every day, all day, every press conference, every week. Tony, if you're listening, put him in there more often, because he was a laugh riot. He probably said more than he should have. Some interesting things about his contract, about his ambitions as a Liverpool player, and about his status as a leader in this team. And I also asked him about goal scoring, because let's face it, 5 goals in 4 years, it's just not going to cut it. But anyway, we will get into all of this once I'm back in the lab. Good evening. We are finally here, back in the lab. The time is, bloody hell, 10:30. I just returned from the Late Challenge Studios. For all of you out there who aren't aware, I am now the co-host of the Late Challenge podcast, elsewhere on YouTube. Go check it out. But I'm now ready. I've digested everything Arne Slot and Ibrahima Konate had to say. I'm here to give you exactly what I think about it. Now, we will start with the injury news. Obviously, we can't start with contracts because no one mentioned contracts. But injury news was pretty heavy enough. Now, Arne Slot didn't make a big deal of it when he said that Jota will be out for weeks, when he bracketed him alongside Joe Gomez and said weeks, not months. But the air was very much let out of the room, and you could almost sense the audible sighs going right across the Liverpool fan base at the news that Jota, just when he thought we were going to be getting him back for this key part of the season, is out again. It's a really, really tough situation because no one wants to be injured. No one goes out there intentionally to be injured. And as I put to Slot later on in the press conference, Liverpool really did everything they could to make sure that he didn't do this. He had 6 substitute appearances in the Premier League. Then he had those 2 starts against Spurs and Accrington, neither of which lasted the full 90 minutes. And then he had another cameo against Forest in which he scored, and we all thought, okay, we've now got Jota back. He can now lead us to victory, as the song says. And yes, he's gone again. But obviously there will be implications for the rest of the forward line amongst all of that, and we will get to those in future as well. But it's time for my top takeaways. Now, with there being Arne Slot and Ibrahima Konate both answering questions, my takeaways are going to be split across the 2 of them. But we'll start with Arne Slot. Top takeaway number 1 is he still can't really read the Champions League table. He was asked about this question, as he's been asked in every single Champions League press conference so far, about the new format, about what it means, the relative strengths and weaknesses of this compared to what we had before, but also the potential benefits of being at the top. And as is still the case, Arne Slot said you can't really tell, because that's really true. We don't know if there's going to be any benefit to being first as opposed to being 3rd or 4th or 5th or even 8th, because we don't know who those other seeds are. At the moment, so much is still up in the air, and the way this format shakes out, even once the final table is settled, you've still then got the draw to work out who plays who in the playoffs and where those playoff matches will land in the bracket. And it's only at that point do you really start to understand where you are and what potential benefits there are. But he's going to keep asking this question because we are in that world where this is all very new and everybody kind of wants to set the baseline over what do we think of this new Champions League format. But in true Arne Slot fashion, he doesn't really seem frustrated or even bored by the question, but he has said, and he has intimated, and he's actually come out and said it, that we'll only really know once the competition's over how we feel about this format. And you know what? I think this is probably the only answer we're going to need, because until then, we just don't know. The knockout stages are still 2 months away, so whatever benefits you would get from winning all 8 games, and don't get me wrong, Arne Slot wants to win all 8 games because he's a Liverpool manager and he wants to win every single game he competes in. But we don't know if he needs to win every game, if there's any benefit in the seedings to winning every game. So he just concentrates on winning games. And you know what? He's doing pretty well with that. Top takeaway number 2. When it comes to tactics, Arne is on his toes. Now, he was asked about Lille and what he expected from them, and his answer was illuminating in a couple of ways. First of all, he came back to a theme that he's spoken about many times so far this season, the idea that plenty of teams have come and faced Liverpool and completely changed what they've done previously. It's weird because he does keep mentioning this, and I still haven't made my mind up whether he likes it or he hates it. I think there's maybe a bit of both. He's a keen strategist. He loves working out tactics and plans. So that part of his brain is very much engaged in coming up with all the different permutations that each team could give. And Lille are one of those teams. They are very tactically flexible. But also in this stage of the season, when you don't have a lot of time with the team on the training pitch, it probably does his head in a little bit. The fact that there's still so many things that he has to deal with that maybe he doesn't have time to really go into depth and in detail into each one of the tactics. It was notable today in the open training session. I know I said earlier on in the video that most of that stuff was just running around. It actually wasn't just running around. We could hear Arne Slot from where we were, and he was very much giving instructions around pressing, around shape, the idea of how to deal with a team that plays out from the back and your 9s and 10s and your pressing triggers and where you need to try to force them to. And we don't normally get to see all that kind of stuff. Usually all we do see is the running around, a bit of like small-sided games, a bit of stretching, a bit of running around, a bit of the players goofing around. But the fact that we were able to see some of that stuff within the 15-minute window we got kind of tells me that Slot doesn't really have the time to waste anymore. He needs as much time as possible with his players on the training pitch to get to what they want to do. And the second part of this is, as I mentioned, they were planning and they were training around the idea of a team that presses, a team that plays out from the back. And that's something that we haven't seen so much in the last couple of games. Obviously, Nottingham Forest were very much wedded to their low block. Now, Brentford added a counter-attacking element to that, but once again, when it came to mass, there was lots of mass defence when it came to Liverpool dominating the ball. You don't suspect that Lille are going to come with that kind of game plan. Well, certainly Arne Slot said if you read anything into their previous games, which as you know we can't completely do, but if you do read stuff into their previous games, then they are going to be a little bit more attacking. They are very much wedded to the idea of playing out from the back. There may not necessarily be as much, or if any, of a low block when they come to Anfield. And I suspect, despite what Arne Slot said in the past, I think he likes that. Now, he did say earlier on in the season that he likes the idea of teams having a low block because it means his team gets more of the ball. But you know what? Maybe he's just saying that. Maybe he's saying that because he knows he's going to have to deal with it a lot. And if he comes out and says, you know what, low blocks do my freaking head in, then everybody who's opposing managers is going to be like, oh, or maybe we'll do that and do his head in a little bit. So maybe there's a bit of kidology there. But the reality is, for a team like Liverpool who thrives on space, who thrives on creativity, who's basically often trying to bait teams onto them, someone who doesn't want to sit back, someone who feels that they have the confidence to come to Anfield and go toe-to-toe with them, is probably going to be a good thing. Now, obviously, we have to recognise the fact that this is a team that have beaten both Atletico and Real Madrid, so they have the ability to perhaps go toe-to-toe with some of the bigger teams. I still think, though, when it comes to the way the Liverpool want to execute their plan, this is the better option. And we'll hopefully see that tomorrow night. Now, I asked Arne Slot a question. My question was more about Jota and how his injuries and the recovery from them might have knock-on effects for some of the other forwards.
Yeah, you mentioned there that Chiesa's still not quite at his level to be able to start 90 minutes. And obviously, Liverpool were very cautious with Diogo Jota and trying to make sure he didn't come back too soon, and yet he still managed to break down. Does that situation mean you're more likely to be even more cautious with Federico, or do you think it's not necessarily one affecting the other?
No, not one affecting the other. Every player is unique in its own way, and everyone has his own background, which I mean, the Jota had a normal pre-season, or not normal because he was at Euros, I think they were in the summer. Yeah, so he didn't have a long pre-season, but he had a normal start with us where Federico didn't. Federico was a few times unlucky with when moments were there for him to play that he was ill or sick. And then I think we all also saw how difficult it is, with Jota is a great example of that, if a player has been out for 5, 6 or 7 weeks, to bring him back to that load of playing every single game 60 to 90 minutes, you have to be really careful with that if you don't want to go into another injury. And Yeah, especially because there's no winter break, there's no time to give them during the week again, unless I have to play them with the under-21s, but I don't think a player like Federico Chiesa, Diogo Jota should play in those games. So that makes it hard if a player is injured to bring them back. And some players are so clear starters for me, I just give them their first minutes in the first team. One of them is coming immediately after me, Ibrahima Konate, played 5 weeks out, played immediately against United, because he's such a vital part of our team. But unfortunately for Federico, he has Mo Salah in front of him, so he doesn't have the similar status or hierarchy as Ibou Konate had. So that makes it hard for us to build him up in the right way, but I'm happy that he had a good 30 to 45 minutes against Accrington Stanley, and although it was 5 minutes, he was part of the team that scored 2 goals, and he was really happy with it, what I saw as well.
Now, when it came to how Arne Slot answered this question, initially it didn't seem like he gave a lot of new information. He referenced with Chiesa once again the whole idea that he didn't have a good pre-season and how that has governed so much of his usage. He mentioned the pre-season for Jota, the fact that he'd been at the Euros, so obviously it's a slightly different kettle of fish for him, but he did reference something he's mentioned previously about the difficulty of building players back up when they come back from injury and giving them the right amount of load that's not too much, but also giving them enough to get into rhythm, something that's very difficult. And unfortunately, as try as they might, Liverpool weren't able to get it right with Diogo Jota. The interesting part though was when he made the comparison between Jota and Konate, because he said that when it came to Jota it was difficult to build him straight back up. However, with Konate, he was more confident to throw him straight in against Manchester United when he came back from injuries, throw him in for at the start. Now obviously he didn't finish that game, and there were a few games after where he didn't necessarily finish them, but he certainly started them. And Arne Slot intimated it was the fact that Konate is a regular guaranteed starter in his team made him feel more comfortable in being able to throw him in and give him the games to build up that kind of consistency, that rhythm, that match fitness that you need to be able to sustain the season. Now, if you look at the forward options at the moment, we say in the central striking options at the very least, of Diogo Jota, Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz, I think most people would say that Jota is the most likely starter, or probably should be at the head of that pecking order. But he's not considered as guaranteed a starter as Ibou Konate, because obviously, as you mentioned, he's treated him differently. Now, Slot did intimate that it was the fact that Konate was a guaranteed starter why he was able to do that with him. And when you think about it, the injury history of Konate and Jota aren't that different. I mean, Jota's probably a more extreme version, but we've seen Konate go down quite a few times, and quite a few people are still concerned about his long-term injury history, but Slot doesn't seem to be. So from that, you can intimate that Jota isn't considered a guaranteed starter in this Liverpool team. Now, whether or not he was, and now no longer he can be, because of his injury situation, or whether there's something else to it, we're not entirely sure. But it is interesting, and one thing to pick up on, perhaps when Jota does come back to full fitness, we'll be able to see whether or not Slot feels comfortable enough giving him a run of starts as he was able to do back earlier on in the season. But we have to remember, this is a guy who hasn't had a league start since October. It's now January. It might be February by the time he comes back. And that's him just getting back onto the training pitch. We don't know how long it'll be before he's available to start Premier League games. So it was a very interesting time for the Liverpool forward line. So many of them have got uncertainty around them. We'll have to wait and see when it comes to the summer who stays and who goes. For my top takeaway number 3, we go over to Ibou Konate, and I wanted to make a mention of the fact that this man is so much fun. Honestly, I could have listened to him talk for hours and hours. He laughs in the face of media training, probably laughed in the face of the media trainer as well, who was probably biting their nails and tearing their hair out at some of the things he said. But we, as journalists, were happy to lap it all up. We may not see him again, but for now, we definitely enjoyed what we saw. And top takeaway number 3, Ibou has a deal on the table from Liverpool. Now, the funny thing about this was that he answered this and let this slip within the context of maybe discrediting some of the earlier transfer news that was out there about him by saying there was one person who was talking, he didn't say anything, the club didn't say anything, and everyone had kind of made assumptions based on this one person. He was a bit surprised by it all. But then, literally seconds later, when he was asked if there was a deal on the table, he said, yes, there is. Paul Joyce kind of pushed him a little further and said, does this mean that your deal is close? And he kind of backed away. He was like, that's a different conversation. God, I love this man. But what that tells you is that Liverpool see him as a key part of the future, and they are definitely looking to lock him down. And from the way he answered it, this doesn't really feel like a Mo Salah style poker-faced answer where he was trying to be cryptic and trying to tease more out of Liverpool. I think he's just being honest, just like Ibou always is being honest. So that tells me that the chances of him signing a new deal are actually pretty high. So here's some good news for all Liverpool fans out there. Now it's time for me to show you exactly what I asked Ibou and how he responded.
Hi Ibou, you're in your fourth season here as a Liverpool player and you've managed to score 5 goals in that time. Now, this is a team that's got lots of set pieces. You had a really good chance in the game against Brentford. Do you think this is an important part of developing as a player to be able to be a threat in the opposing box as well as really good in your own box?
Yeah, for sure. This is very important, especially for a defender. We want a clean sheet always. And yeah, like you said, I scored 5 goals. And I really hope more because my target this season was to score 4 goals. I have 2 left. And if 2 more I can score, I will be very happy. But the more important now is to have a win with a clean sheet. And for my goal, it's okay. It's not important.
Now, part of me kind of felt bad when he answered that question because it seemed like he was a little bit embarrassed by the fact that he didn't score 5 goals, but you did get a really good insight into his mind. And the way that he answered, the first thing he mentioned was the defending and how he wants to be really good in his own box, defending. The last thing he mentioned was about clean sheets and about how if they win and get a clean sheet, that's all that matters. So you can tell that that part really is the bread and butter. That's what he knows he's there for. But in between, he did also say that he set himself a target for goals for this season, which tells you that he's aware that he probably is underperforming when it comes to the attacking side of the game. His target is 4, by the way, which is not beyond the realms of possibility considering he's already halfway there. So I'd like to think that he can reach that target, and I think that he's been quite good in the Champions League. I think 3 of his 5 goals for Liverpool have come in the Champions League. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he can make that 4 and get up to 3 for the season against Lille tomorrow. But we'll have to wait and see. Thank you all very much for persevering with me through this long and arduous day. But I call it arduous. It was actually enjoyable, as these kind of days always are. Honestly, getting to do this is a joy and a privilege that I do not take lightly, and I have a lot of you to thank for being able to help me get to that point. So I want to say thank you for all of you who have been here watching, subscribing, listening, liking, commenting, telling your friends. All of that stuff really matters to me. Now, I'm going to be doing all of this again on Friday, hopefully a little bit more comfortably, a little bit earlier as well. Well, it'll need to be at this time on Friday. I'll probably be in the Jacaranda DJ. So, all that to be said, you know where to find me. I'm there on Substack. I'm there on This Is Anfield. I've just recorded the Late Challenge. Go and check out the latest episode of that. And I will be on the Anfield Wrap later this week. So, there's plenty more of Mo, and hopefully we've got lots of good news to spread about Arne Slot's Liverpool side winning through to the Champions League knockout stages with breeze. See you then.